All right, perfect. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the New Jersey Cannabis Training Academy live Q&A session for our Level 9 SOPs on retail dispensing. This is exciting because we all know that the dispensary retail is like the cornerstone of the industry, right? This is where rubber meets the road, and a lot of us doing what we want to do here. And with us is our level 9 instructor, Suzanne Nicholson, who is the CEO and founder of Holistic Solutions, the first Black woman owned and woman owned dispensary to open in New Jersey. She has an incredible story, and I'm going to pass the mic to her so you guys can get the full spiel. I always believe everyone should get the full spiel because not only is Suzanne just a rock star in the industry, she had been a personal mentor to me and so many other people throughout the industry. So I think this is going to be a really good Q&A. And for those of you who are looking to open a dispensary, this will be top shelf gems that you will receive on how to do this properly. So before we get into that, just a bit of housekeeping. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Thank you. We know that getting to level 9 in the training academy is not easy. That means you made it through all of the also important levels that helps you get your application together. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or within the Q&A box. We'll get to those as we're having our conversation. Also, feel free to raise your hand or give us your question in the Q&A boxes and chats. Feel free to also drop where you're dialing in from or even what level you're on or what license type you're going to go after. This kind of helps me facilitate the conversation, and I'd love to get some of your questions answered. We'll probably be on for a little over 45 minutes. So I just can't wait to jump into it. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to our level 9 instructor, Suzanne. Thank you for joining us.
You're
If you
welcome.
could please bless this audience with a little bit about you, how you got started in cannabis, and what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Well, Suzanne Nicholson, CEO and founder of Holistic Solutions. Got into cannabis being, in an herbalist household. I would say, proudly Jamaican born, came to the States in the 70s. Really introduced to cannabis at a very early age. I'd always say my parents met on a photo shoot for my mom. My mom actually brought cannabis in through one of her plants and started growing it in the backyard when my father actively worked at the sheriff department. You can understand the fireworks in the household and that not being something that my father said would be legal in the country. Fast forward to 1996. I'm pursuing a career, thinking I'm going to be a lawyer, entertainment law, and then find out that my mother was diagnosed with cancer and given 1 year to live. So as we prepared what we thought was my mother's transition, she was adamant that it was not. She felt that if we had got access to some of the seeds and genetics from the island that she was more familiar with, that she could create a place of sustainability for herself. At that time, I could proudly say now that we were in the legacy space hard and really working with family. We're able to get genetics from my mother. And you can imagine in the 1990s, it was highly criminalized. But we took a family oath that we would support our mother. My mother transitioned in 2013. So from 1996 until my mother's transition, we really studied cannabis from a medical capacity, working with the National Institute of Health and other federal agencies to really create backdoor programs for those who believed in plant-based medicine. Unfortunately, my mother transitioned, but we also had another opportunity to look at the cannabis industry in Colorado. My younger brother, proud military, retired there. And as you know, we went to visit and started to really look at the Colorado market, the California market, and New Jersey had an opportunity here. I had been a part of state government probably for 24 years, building system structures and building community. And I said to my family, I believe that we could really develop a really great cannabis company. I wrote our application along with my significant other and another good colleague. And in 2019, we submitted that application. It was held up for 2 years for litigation. And on December 7th, 2021, out of 30 applications, Holistic Solution was the only Black-owned, first female-owned, medically licensed in the state, first to transition. Unfortunately, I had to step away from state government and accept my license, but it was an opportunity um, that was really profound. Being able to bring plant-based medicine, being the first woman of color to be able to bring that opportunity, and watching my mother's journey and knowing that there were so many minority and other communities that were distrusting of medicine, but we're using cannabis in so many ways. And it's been an honor to really develop and bring forth plant-based medicine and really mentor those. Because when we started out, there was really very few. Wanda was one of them, Hope, OG from Maryland. You know, very few of us in the space on the East Coast. And I always said that I would be the first in New Jersey, and Ja has destined that. And it's just an opportunity of really bringing free lessons and gems and giving back and creating a path forward for those who are really interested in retail.
Thank you so much for that story. Every time I hear it, it just reminds me that when I talk to other business owners, I hope everyone has a why they entered this industry that really propels you, because you get hit with a lot of you get hit with a lot of things, and you have to navigate those things to be open. So again, shout out to you and all your success. For everyone who's joining, Suzanne mentioned gems. We're going to get into a lot of those because I think you've been able to see the industry from a very specific standpoint, not just as a woman of color, but really how to build business from from the ground up. When there weren't a bunch of regulations, when there weren't other dispensaries to act, how did you do this? Where did you do this? So let's just dive into it, starting with like SOPs, right? I think when it comes to retail, it just feels like a heavy lift to put these plans together if you've never really done this before. What was your process in establishing your SOPs for dispensing? Where did you go to find information on how you build these SOPs altogether?
So I come from state background, supervising regulations and understanding a regulatory system. So for us, a lot of the research was really from the CRC themselves. The CRC gave regulation statutes that gave governance of how we should operate. I always believe in not to recreate the wheel.
Yeah.
Applications have to be redacted and put out for the public. And in that process, I went back and looked at former applications to look at their systems and structures. I also went and looked at other states that were licensed and had their applications available. And we also work with our great legal advisor, Jennifer Cabrera, who guided us through this process. And with the mixture of having a regulatory background and looking at what was ahead of us, we were able to do a lot of it ourselves and then have it finalized by our legal counsel. So, and the CRC was a wonderful free resource that we readily utilize all the time. And then looking at other states, believe it or not, it's part of a licensing program that all of applicants have to put out their application in redacted form. And even in redacted form, there's a wealth of information that you could learn for free that would be very helpful to you. So that was kind of our pathway. And again, working with our legal counsel in the finalization of those documents.
One thing I always say is like you can't really skip the research phase when it comes to cannabis. I also remember when I was first looking to join the industry going through Massachusetts library of applications, because another cheat code, guys, Massachusetts actually doesn't redact anything. It's all there, black and white, down to who's splitting the pie, what they're gonna do, how they're gonna operate. So definitely engage in those resources. I'm sure part of developing your SOPs also has to do with like your location, which honestly is for what we learn with our students is one of the biggest hurdles in getting into the industry. What was it like navigating finding your location? And did you have to build your SOPs around that? Or do you have to or can you build SOPs without having a firm location to do a dispensary?
Great question. I think God always knew what our location would be. In our submission, I put in that we wanted to do a drive-through. I always envisioned having a drive-through component. So part of the location was looking at something that we could convert, whether it was accessible currently or we would have to build it out. Fast forward, location also was very primary in sustainability of where you put your community. So you can write out your standard operating procedures as far as a location, but in finalizing that, there might be some nuances that you might want to go back and enhance, but your SOP could be written outside of finding location. Now, in certain locations, there might be closing. I know some individuals that are in shared locations to where it's a center that closes at 9 o'clock. And maybe in your previous draft of SOP, you had yourself staying open to 10. Now, if you found your location, you would have to have an ability of modifying that SOP to be in accordance to your lease or the governing hours of operation. So again, you could start drafting that, but again, you look at finalizing that when you pick your location at the end.
Nice. And then a little bit more on location, thinking about security. They're part of your SOPs. I think one of the major part of SOPs is writing out your security plan to outfit your location. I want to talk about like that outside hiring that comes into supporting your retail. That can get quite costly. What was your process? What are some suggestions for those who are looking to build out their plans right now and seeing these big ticket consulting items? Like security is unavoidable. Like, what do you end up doing?
Great question. You really need to look at your town ordinance. Your town ordinance gives you guidance of what they allow. Some towns have written in that you require armed security. So in the cost of armed security for your operations, that would be a major factor. Depending on armed security rates, I've heard that run anywhere between 42 to anywhere between $78, depending on armed security fee. If you only require a guard, that's something that you could look to in-house through a individual that is SORA licensed. And with that license, you can then go to your insurance company and then do a different amendments and buffers. Some people do a split. Some people will use an external third party for maybe their higher traffic days. And then some individuals will use an in-house. Some individuals use in-house totally, depending again on the ordinance, and they do training. It's resourceful depending on where you're located. And then there are some locations that depending on that ordinance, there's no wiggle room. If they're calling for armed security, that's going to be a part of your fee
Yeah.
and cost. So again, it's really predicated on what the ordinance of where you're establishing your retail. And if it doesn't specify, that's a conversation and that is a business decision. And your business decision, you look at the cost. Are you going to be able to afford armed 5 or 7 days a week if you're going to be operational? That's a high ticket. Or are you going to look to do something where you're going to do a contracted third party for a modified part of your week? Or you're going to look to totally in-house that process. And if you're going to in-house that process, that has to be a well-trained process. And I assure you, you should be having this conversation with your legal counsel and your insurance provider, because those are your key resources in approval.
Yeah. And Alvin, I hope that answers your question here about, some NJ locations having no armed security on site. So Suzanne is saying that's basically what the township requires. If the township requires for armed security, you have to make that investment. If they don't, then you're able to make that decision on what would be the best security guidance, or you'll look at what the CRC has put out for guidance around security. Nonetheless, all of this has to be written out as a plan that you submit anyway, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next questions around forming your SOPs. When you have to produce your SOPs and write them, are there any templates or things that you think are standardized enough across all platforms from different states or different areas of research that you can implement? Or do you really have to conduct and create a lot of these from scratch?
Yes and no. There are some things that are transitional. Your cash counting operations, there are some things that might be somewhat universal, and that there are going to be some things that are going to be very customized to your store, how you operate, very personalized. So I think it's a mixed bag of both. How you quarantine a product is a universal process amongst vendors. How you recall a product is universal because it's governed by regulations. How you advertise on websites should be universal minus your disclaimers. And again, I'm going through SOPs that again, you would look to pretty much you could have a, not to use the word cookie cutter, but have a repeated template approach in there. Now, your delivery, how you onboard staff, your cash handling procedures, how you document unusual incidents, how you log in visitors, how you prepare for inspections, how you pick up from cash courier. Those need to be pretty specific because those would result in unusual incidents if things would go awry.
Yeah. And how much time do you spend training your employees on these SOPs? Sometimes I feel like when we write them, I don't know if people think like they don't use them anymore. It's just something to submit. Do you find yourself having to refer back to your SOPs for like a process, even if it like hasn't happened yet?
So that's a great thing. Your SOPs is like a living document. Our SOPs are reflective of our policies and procedures. So it's like a hand in hand, like a yin and a yang.
Mhm.
So our SOPs, I would say, is the roadmap, but our policy and procedures are kind of like that little navigation of how we dip off, kind of how we govern our day. But we build that off of our SOP. So yes, training is paramount. I think training is key to any real success. If people aren't properly trained, they don't feel comfortable. If they don't feel comfortable, they're not confident. If they're not confident about something, it's going to show in their customer engagement. It's going to show in their lack of reluctance to really readily make recommendations for product. So the best way to remove that is to provide training. And I think training is really an eclectic way of looking at things. Everybody has different learning styles. So I think making sure that you don't just provide like a cookie cutter approach to how you engage with your team members. Some people are more hands-on. Some people are visual. Some people have like a immersive part of both. Some people are like, let me read it, come back to you and ask questions. So again, I think making sure that you do lunch and learns, you have something that is visual, that's a virtual based platform, having quizzes and games, fun crossword things, just different things that we engage with. Scavenger hunts. I like to do competition, whether we're doing it because, we never give anything away for free. We charge a very low nominal, whether it's giving an eighth away for a penny. Um, of being able to know, like, if I ask, like, what's the highest terpene of myrcene in the hybrid flower category? Like those obscure questions that our customers come in and they ask. So we would need to be prepared and trained to be able to find that. So we do scavenger hunts, different creative ways of getting information out that don't become redundant or overwhelming to people. So again, it's just very adaptive to the team. We have a small team and we're growing, but I just find just providing different methods of how we train has been very successful.
Thanks for that. I want to jump into a question from our Q&A box here from Allie. Says, can you talk a little bit about inventory strategy and sales ramp up? What would you suggest in terms of initial order for your first month or two, and how do you forecast a few months? And I like to add in and say, like, even when you're thinking about inventory and sales, let's say before you even open, how do you put that in SOP format, or like how do you manage that part of the business before you get started? But answering first, what have you been doing on that side? And then again, that second question is how do you even prep for it if you're still in the application phase?
Okay. So Allie's question, and then please make sure I'm going to probably ask you to repeat Allie's question
Yeah,
again.
let me repeat it word for word one more time. Can you talk a little bit about inventory strategy and sales ramp up? What would you suggest in terms of an initial order for your first month or two? And how do you forecast the first few months of sales?
Okay, let's pause right there then. So what we did as initial forecasting, we looked to see what vendors, based on analytic reports, how they were moving in the market, what consumers were asking for. We did a general Q&A, like a soft kind of survey before we rolled out. We then met with all vendors and then you did your engagement of your supply agreement. For our rollout, a lot of people wanted us to look to spend a lot of money, but for us, we did small spends. Small spends with a large variety of vendors. That way we had a very eclectic board. I didn't bring in too much product from one particular vendor because we weren't really sure about the foot traffic or how that would really move, even though it may have had some movement in the market. And then for the first couple months, we looked to make sure that we were spending under, and this again, I'm probably like an OG to this, looking at current people, we spent under 60,000 when we looked to convert from medical to recreational. And I felt that that gave us a very diverse menu. Currently, I would say definitely budget for up to 70. Some people look to use expiring products as a carrot and sale. And this is something that, you heard it here. It's called a carrot. So it's going to be something that's going to draw people in. So if you're working with the vendor and they have like a $3 expiring eighth that's coming up and you're getting ready to come on, okay, you might be able to push out like a $10 eighth. That's going to be flashy. That's going to be spicy. It's going to be sensational. It's going to get people talking. It's going to get it buzzy. So you might look to do some of that, but then also be wary, be cognizant. Don't buy too much because again, these are things that are going to have a short shelf life. There are people who have built their entire business operations just based on exactly what I just told you. Buying a product that has a short shelf life, buying it at a lower discount, marking it down, marking it at below competitor prices, again, drawing their customers away, and then bringing them to your store. That I believe, is a decent approach in some things, and we've used it strategically. But again, you don't want to get caught out there and have too much of this product that has a short shelf life, and you then are stuck with it yourself. So I would say for us, it was anywhere between that 60 and 70,000 spend. And if you're going to do anything more, make sure you're not overspending, especially on products like manufactured products and concentrates. They tend to have a lower portion of consumers, so you don't want to have too much. I remember a colleague who said that they allowed other people to buy for them. Don't ever do that. Like when Oprah said she signs all your checks, you make sure you know what you're spending and you have the money to spend. Don't be out there spending other people's money with no intention of paying your vendors. That's a relationship. Your vendors need to eat too. So make sure that if you're ordering the product, you have budgeted money to pay for that. And that's not, oh, we're going to have sales because these people will come in. We're going to have customers. No, when you're doing that, you need to make sure that you have the cash to pay that in 30 days because a lot of different things can happen between the time of your launch and to make sure that you're buying it closer to your launch. Don't feel over pressured by vendors to, it's called FOMO, fear of missing out, right? You won't. Be very thrifty, be very frugal, but make sure you're also building relationships because these relationships will be feast or famine. When things are good, it's good. But when things become famine, there have been some famine periods where product have been slim to none, and you want to have the ability of being a person who pays their bills, has a good rapport and relationship, and really is presenting their product in the best way. So there was a third part to that question, I think.
Yes, that was my part where if you are someone in the application phase and you don't really have, I guess it's more like about predictability then that you're putting in to, I'm not even sure if that's a SOP that you're creating in terms of how you plan to manage inventory. Maybe it's just like a quick outline plan. So if it's a SOP, how can someone start to think about it? I know they heard it in the practical way you mentioned, but application phase, you haven't even, started to talk to vendors. How do you kind of outline that for your applications purposes?
So inventory is like your meat and potatoes. That's how you make your money. That's how your consumers get your product. So how you move inventory in should be very strategic. Inventory should be moved in through your order intake, which is your designated portion where your vendors come in. So that's already something identified in your SOP. So when you move in product, there should be a port of entrance. That should also be tied to the alert notification to your delivery guards. Some people have a dual process to their store of how they move inventory in. You go to the guard, then you go to a secondary spot. They let you in. It's buzzed and secured. They go through the inventory. It's signed off. How that inventory then moves into your store, once you make sure that you have all your bells and whistles, sign off on that manifest, check off on that invoice, individuals may either quarantine or move that product into order intake. If you move it into order intake, at this point, you're prepping it to get on your floor, go out into your pick and pack, prepping it for sale. Once it goes into your pick and pack room, it's available to your customers on e-commerce. Now, that's something that's a standard SOP. That's how you move inventory in. There's really no spiciness about it. It's just pretty commonplace. Now, the bells and whistles come in on what inventory you select. What are you picking for your store? How you quarantine a product if there's a recall. Quarantine is the same way. We all have quarantine cages in our stores. That product would then need to be identified in metric, which is the seed to sale system of how we move our product. Once you put something into quarantine, you may put something into quarantine. Let's say you don't have a certificate of analysis or there's something awry with that package that you can't move it right now, or it's defective in some way, you might want to quarantine it. You might not want to put it into your order intake. That's a standard SOP that you would develop. It really wouldn't change. How product goes out. Product goes out through your pick and pack. It goes out from your seed to sale, which is your point of sale system. It's handled by authorized people. It's only held in secured locations in your store. That's a standard SOP. It's moved from register with identification to the customer, which is a verified age. Then it's rung up, and then it normally leaves your store unless it's a return, which are rare exceptions and few. And then even those, you have a standard operating procedure about how you handle a return or a defective product. Because again, as retailers, many of us aren't making products. We're not the producers of those products, and nothing is perfect. So of course, there might be something that we sell as retailers that is defective. And each retailer has their own individual, and this is your own business related decision that you make as your own individual company on how you handle that. Some people don't take returns at all. Some people say sales are final. Some people say that it's within a certain period with proof of receipt and other nuances. But again, those standard operating procedures are across the board universally in our industry and are customized to how you as a business owner make your business related decisions.
Thanks for that breakdown, Suzanne. And I hope that answered your question. Just moving right along to get to a couple other parts of the SOP that I think are important. You called it a living document, meaning that like it's gonna have several versions and version controls. How often should you review those SOPs, and how do you make sure that they're compliant? Because rules change. Do you have to update your rules? I mean, update your SOPs as rules change, which can happen, I think, both on the local level and on the state level.
Correct. Yes. It's important to kind of take, I would say every 2 months wouldn't hurt to take a look at your SOPs, because your SOPs and your policy and procedures live hand in hand. And these are conversations that you have with your leadership team or your management team, or you should be having. Yes, on the regulatory state level, things change. And on your local level, things will change. And with those changes, that may impact your standard operating procedure. There was a town recently that had operating hours until 11 p.m., which is a little late, at least in our area. We live in the dirty South, South Jersey. And a new administration came in and they felt that that was something that really wasn't in line with their master plan, and they rolled that back, and now their new operating hours are 10 p.m. Again, previously that would have impacted your standard operating procedures of operating hours. You would have to make those changes. You couldn't keep your 11 p.m. because again, even though that was submitted to the state and that's what the state approved, your now local government has made modifications. And with those modifications, you would then need to adapt. So that's a great example of how something may have been different earlier, and now you have to make modifications.
And I would assume it's also the same thing with recalls, like you mentioned before too, when you're even going through that inventory process, having a snippet there that deals with problematic products or issues. What does that recall and even like that auditing SOP look like as you are sort of prepping to open? How do you start to like tackle putting that on paper?
So recall, you just have to be familiar with how would you isolate something that may be a problem? Again, you would identify your quarantine cage or your quarantine system as a place of isolation. You would normally identify that in metric. Sometimes recalls happen either by manufacturer. There's something that is hazardous to the consumer, or there's a recall because the regulator feels that packaging may be too inducing to children. And with that, there's been both on the market. There's been product recall on the market to where a product was determined to be defective and unsafe and had to be returned. With that, you would have to have identified that product and metric. You would have to immediately pull that product from your pick and pack. That product generates a list of sales. So normally that, unless it's an anonymous customer, but even though you would have to be able to provide that list of customer base to the regulator if required. And then for those who may have recall by packaging, same process. Those things are not able to be sold. So you would have to be able to pull it from your shelf, make sure it's no longer visible to consumers. And that's identifying your SEO team, making sure you're marketing. You may have a whole marketing campaign around a product that may now be determined to be recalled, whether it be for safety reasons or for packaging reasons. You have to be nimble and you need to make sure that you're able to isolate it. And then also be responsive to the regulator who's putting out a regulatory notice of a recall. And in those notices, there are action items and call to action that you as a retailer must do within a time-sensitive period. So those things are very important. So having a very detailed SOP in how you isolate, whether it's long-term or for a short-term period, a product is something that you would develop. You would look at current recall SOPs in our state and then look at others. Again, it's making sure that you have an isolated product that wouldn't contaminate and you have a readily available way of whether you have to contact consumers. That's not happened to date where you have to contact a consumer, but again, our consumers are either identified anonymous or by another. And depending on how people shop, you still would have to produce a list that an anonymous customer bought this. Sometimes it would produce a warning label. We haven't had that in our industry. I know of some other individuals who have put up that this product was sold at this store. Any consumer who has bought this product should be in contact with the store. Again, these things not have happened in our state, but again, looking at the industry, you would be able to look at another state's recall SOPs, modify those to New Jersey's practices.
Thanks for that. One thing we know about you, Suzanne, is that you're in that store. You're there right now, right? And
Yes.
you are a very hands-on owner, leader, CEO. Um, is that what you recommend? Because in terms, I see people who might hire compliance officers that deal with SOPs that can like ring the bell for everybody when they see something, they're saying something. For a small business, even a micro, is that a position they should look out for? Or do you think the owner operator has to take more control of that compliance area, make sure the SOPs are being lived up, edited, audited? Whose role does that fall to?
I think that's really a business decision of how you set up your company. Some individuals I know have set it up to where they've hired a manager, they've hired a general ops. They don't live in the state and they really farm all those responsibilities to someone else, but they have been owners and operators in other states. So for
Yeah.
them, this is not a new system. Um, for individuals who have some business acumen, who feel like, no, I don't have to be in person in store. I thought for us, I was just saying, in order to lead something for me, it's easier for me to understand it. I wouldn't
Yeah.
ask someone to do something that I'm not doing. And it's a family project. We operate as if we are a micro. So I think the largest that we've ever grown was 16. So we have a very small footprint, and having a very small footprint requires diversification in skill sets and transferable skill sets. So we really look to capitalize on the resources of the team, and make sure, and that also helps keep costs down. Because when you look at output and personnel, security, all those things cost. As we grow, no, I work more on the business than I do in the business, but I'm a very face here. Again, you'll see me on the register. You might even see me taking in a delivery, moving a project. You might see me in a panel. You might see me outside, raking the leaves or planting the garden. There's nothing too personal about my project. It's our project. I love our project, and I appreciate everyone who helps in building our company. So for me, it's been more of a personalized approach. But again, as we scale, in other states, because God always manifests in calls. I'll definitely be hands-on, but I won't have the ability of being there. But I think, developing those leadership traits and understanding a system. So when things go wrong, I'm like, oh, okay, let me look and navigate to see how I can move that product or help people. And I think for our team members, it's disarming too, because people are like, I didn't even know you were the owner. Like, I've been in here all the time. Like, you might see me in a skull cap, some sweats, and
Yeah.
I ring you up. We talk about life. I ask about your kids. And, I think for us, it's a personal approach to how we do business, and how we build our brand. And
Yeah.
yes, very incognito most of the time.
I really like that answer. You brought up something earlier about micros, operating like a micro, even though you're full. Do you think your SOPs will differ if you are actually a micro business versus if you are a standard dispensary? Should you think a little bit different as you're putting together your SOPs, or do you think they kind of live under the same branch?
Definitely different. For micros, it's a capacity of 2,500 square feet. You're capped at 10 employees. Um, it's a little bit of a tighter model. There are a lot of universal similarities in how you operate. The inventory is a little bit different because you are capped at a certain inventory threshold. But I always tell people those small giants are doing wonderful things in New Jersey market. So you could have a very well-run, efficient, profitable micro. On the other hand, you could have, unfortunately, bad location of a standard, that is not well run, that it's not doing well. So I really think it's based on your business acumen, where you're building out your team, and then also scaling, because having a micro, it gives you certain roadways and maps. You can convert your micro to a standard. So I always tell people, like, live in the success where you are right now. Get really, really good at that. Grow in that. Keep your costs down. And as you scale, look to, see what those opportunities look like, and not to be so quick to sometimes jump out. And sometimes for those individuals who have said, thank you for that advice, because right now, that's allowed us to really pursue a manufacturing that
Mhm.
we weren't really going to do because we were focusing on something else. And right now it's looking like a different partnership. And now we're creative in a different area, to where being a small is good. Keeping your costs down is good. Being profitable is good.
I was gonna say that being profitable is I don't want to say it's like pulling a Houdini in the cannabis industry, but it's definitely not the simplest approach. I'm gonna take another question here from the chat. Can you produce events at your locations, indoors and outdoors, education, community, music, and culture?
Yes, with the approval of your township, again, understanding your ordinance, understanding what your municipality would allow, and also having a direct conversation and approval from your compliance investigator. I think I tell him everything. Like, this is what we're doing. This
Mhm.
is what I'm looking to do. Because again, I don't want to be in a place of violation or a place of unawareness. So yeah, we've had concerts here. Um, we've had wellness programs here. We've had educational seminars here. We've hosted individuals. How do we promote these events? We promote them on our website. We do direct mailers. We do our social media. We work with our township. Our township also has a media program to where we will go over to our municipality and put up our flyers. I'm old school. I will pull up to all my local businesses and be like, listen, we're having something. I expect to see you all because
Yeah.
again, reciprocity, when people come through our business and they're looking to get something to eat because we can service food, I'm going to promote you to the local deli. So I'd like to see my flyer when I pull up in your window, you know?
I like
So,
that.
so again, like most people know me and you are what I see. So I'm very like, hey, like, let's do some business together. Like, let's make business for ACO and Waterford, our community where we do business. I'm not only looking to be successful, I'm also looking to make your business successful. So again, by putting up my flyer, advertising, leaning into those resources, we go to a lot of free events locally and build into local community events, whether it's putting up our pop-up, having someone go there professionally prepared to talk about the business. Those things are gems.
Yeah.
They don't cost a lot of money,
Yeah.
but you can advertise. And if you're having something, it keeps your marketing resources. I don't know, a lot of mercy how many times we've gone through marketing nightmares and promises, but I think for us, um, tapping into local community resources, being able to promote our events, having direct conversations with our compliance investigator, because if you're not having those approvals, no. And if the CRC tells you no, it's a no.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't suggest you do something, because apparently they're up all hours of the night watching video cameras and, they are providing a healthy financial violations, which none of us want. So I always say, like, have a conversation with your municipality, see if that's something that they would be supporting. Have a conversation with your council, your compliance officer, and then promote it.
Someone said, I love this approach. I love this approach too. I know it's for something else, but this as well. I think why I appreciate you always talking and spending your time, especially with the CTA, because it's not the traditional big business, bully your way in to create a company. It has a lot of authenticity in it, but it also has a lot of strategy behind it, right? And speaking of strategy, I have two more questions. One of them being, how do you think actually, I have a few more, but how do you think your SOPs, do you think you really learned your business from your SOPs? Did your SOPs end up teaching you a little bit more about how to operate? Is that usually the case when you're building out your SOPs?
Yes, because for us, when we work with our council, we had to say, well, what do you do if this happens? So then I had to think like, well, what do we do?
Yeah.
Um, is this effective? Am I just writing this to say that I have something there? Is this really functional? And then in the draft form, implement that and then talk to the people who are actually doing that day-to-day job and saying that that didn't really make any sense. How we were doing something initially, before we rolled it out, we realized it was going to create so much chaos for the team, that we put a pause on it
Yeah.
and operationally had to go back and ask the CRC to make a building modification. And it was an easier process to get product out and it was easier on the team. But that was based on writing the SOP. Well, our lights are censored, so I'm going to be back in 1 second.
No problem.
So that's a security feature we have. After a certain point, the sensors go off. and then it'll say that there's no movement. I guess I've been sitting too still in this chair. But it said, there's no movement, there's no movement. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I think for me, it was beneficial to be a part of writing out those SOPs and be very personalized with it. So then I figured out this doesn't work. Like, and you don't want to write out things that are just supplemental check boxes for you to get open and realize that this is not even a functional process for you or your team. And then also being okay to be adaptive. You will find out that you've written something that just doesn't work. It needs to be redone, it needs to be reworked. Don't be afraid of that. Lean into that system and process, because that's how you grow. That's how you're scaling. It's how you become better as a business person. That's how your team becomes better too. And be open to hearing feedback from your team about the processes that you're implementing and the impact it has on them
Yeah.
and delivery of service. So
Yeah.
I always say that that's a level of reciprocity to where you don't create things in a vacuum.
Nice. And what are some things you saw that are sort of like um SOPs don'ts, like the do not do this while you're putting together your SOPs, or avoid doing this pitfall if you want to be successful?
What would I wouldn't do with my SOPs? I wouldn't be writing like 10 pages. Oh my gosh. I think I wrote way too much at the beginning. And like setting yourself up for these unrealistic expectations. Like you have to be realistic. And I think, in the beginning, I was like, we were going to have this and this. And it's like, no, that's not a functional
Yeah.
process. I think it being too wordy, too lengthy, too legalese, Lord of mercy, too legalese. I think having things to where people understand them, um, functional documents that describe your business. When someone picks up your SOPs, they should be able to pick up and have a really good at glance of how you run your business.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a story, and you always want to make sure it's a well-defined and structured story with good details.
Yeah. And for me, I think too, when I've seen some SOPs put together, they're simple as like step one, open the drawer. Step two, close the
Yes,
drawer. Step
yes.
three, lock the drawer. It doesn't have to like go into, like you said, some crazy legalese to explain how you open and close a cash drawer.
Oh,
Um,
another thing too, don't be too tied into like identifying like a platform. You should
mhm,
talk about something in general, because again, you may start off with a platform that you may need to move from. So I
mhm,
think just having like a general description about a cash courier and not identifying things by specific name are always cleaner, because if you change those things and don't go back and update that SOP, and if something happens and you're looking at something like, oh, that's not even reflective of where we are now. So I would say making sure you're not too specific in identifying a system unless your compliance investigator calls it out in your SOP. And that's another thing too. These are submitted to your compliance investigator and their supervisors who review them.
Okay, very nice. Which I want to reiterate that your SOPs and your compliance materials do go through a process of review. So everyone should make and a process of audit. CRC can come at any time and be like, please produce this SOP. You must make sure you have it. So these are not optional. Um, One of my last questions is that retail is one of the only places where it's customer facing, right? This is where customers get to come in, see, understand the dispensary, understand products. There's so much education that can go into that. It feels like developing SOPs for customer service and customer education, that could be its own miniature beast. Any advice in terms of how people should think about that, handling customers, creating an environment within dispensaries that feels safe and welcoming and informative?
I think for me, I wanted to create a space of welcome, kind of mirroring like the vibe of our island. I don't think anybody's gone to Jamaica and had a bad time. So for us, it's like having a spirit of our house. When people came through, it was always welcoming, filled with art, filled with culture, music, um, and great cannabis in a conversation. And I always say, like, I won't be mad if I'm the Chick-fil-A of cannabis because, again,
Mm,
Chick-fil-A is like a great service. It's consistent, and you're going to get good customer service. I think
yeah,
for me, customer service is essential. Um, you live and die by that brand of how you relate to people. Being personable, being kind, being professional, being welcoming
yeah,
doesn't cost anything.
yeah,
And I think that when you love something and you care about something, it's a reflection of the people that really are your brand ambassadors.
mm,
I know a lot of people are calling people bud tenders, and I was like very early on, like, nah, y'all are brand ambassadors. Like
yeah,
Holistic is a small giant. We are 300 in the Persian army, and we won. And
mm,
for us, we're not the biggest conglomerate company, but we make moves in New Jersey. It's a recognizable brand with a recognizable company. And believe it or not, when people come, we're like, yeah, it's like less than 20 of you all. And it's always been like that. But again, I think for us, it's important to drill that without customers, we don't live, we don't eat. How people engage and how they remember us. We want it to be a wonderful experience that people are willing to come back and invite other people to. So for us, it has to matter. Now, everything is not perfect. There might be times that, you bought something and it didn't go right. The website sometimes is our Achilles heel, a lot of mercy, changing over systems. But again, I always want people to leave in a better place than they came from. And if we're not able to, which is very rare, I want you to have that understanding that we tried our very best.
right.
So I think that that's very, very important. I think someone asked about how do we get like sales and investors.
Yeah. How'd you get I wanted to join these questions together. Let's take a couple of our questions now, so I'm all wrapped up with mine. Yeah, what steps did you take to get investors, any state or federal funding? And I think that wraps in with what Michelle is asking in terms of like just sponsors to help, I guess, fund your business, and like how do you find said people?
So for us, our pitch deck and our pro forma, I'm not afraid of a no. I'll ask. We did pitches for multi-state operators. We did pitches for investment individuals. We looked at doing a family and friend raise, which we eventually did for some partners that we brought in. I think, money was very important to me, and having money where we could have it come from a reputable place, um, that would come with experience. I think for myself and Marissa, and the bakers. It's been like a labor of love. It's been predatory at times. I wouldn't be honest if I wouldn't say that there's not been predatory people who have approached us and try to do some predatory things. But I think with that, we've had great legal counsel. I remember at a place of looking for funding, and someone saying you can't take that money because it's like it won't pass financial probity.
Yeah.
And it's a place of like, you're almost like, well, my project is not going to be able to go forward. And I remember someone being like, it's like Ozark. And I'm crazy. So I was like, the people in Ozark lived, right? And then like my legal team was like, no, no, Susan. Yeah, like we have to make sure like it's the highest level of trust. Like you're going to be the first woman of color in the state of New Jersey to have something, and it has to be something of high regard. Everyone is looking, everyone wants to see. It has to be something that of a legacy that you leave behind for others. So I can't be sloppy in how I move. I cannot be different. I
Yeah.
have to make sure like I'm leaving a good pathway for people to come behind and really say like, she came, she left, and she also helped so many people along the way. And in that, it's always her helpfulness and her willingness to be supportive, um, and lead by example and lead in a good way.
Well, that I have I have so many questions because Suzanne, I can keep asking you on and on. There's two here in the Q&A box that I'm gonna get to. Gabriel asks, and this may not necessarily be, I just want to mention too, for things Suzanne said, we do have in our level 5 course, a whole financial forecasting course, with Devin McLaren, who is a professional financial advisor. So if you need help building out your pro forma, learning about investments, where to find funding, that course will be especially helpful for you. So make sure you guys are in the CTA portal. Um, Now it says, where can you buy seeds legally? I know this may not be your wheelhouse. Also, we do have a level 9 cultivation SOPs. We did answer that question in our last Q&A, which you can find online and in that level 9 course. So Gabriel, make sure you check that out. But Suzanne, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts to lend here on this question for buying seeds legally.
Good question. You know, I will defer to that because, there are resources that you can bring product in. So a lot of my first training with my legacy operators were in hemp. So I work with getting them in hemp incubators and working with nurseries to really understand the regulated side of cannabis. They knew how to grow, clearly, knew how to make money. But I said, brethren, now we need to make sure it's regulated. It has to be defined within certain standard operating procedures. Like we have to write down the timing of the lights. In order to sometimes get people into a different state, right, and expose them, we worked with nurseries and it was CBD. So we did CBD seeds that we grew legally, and there are places that you could look to do that. And we worked under the umbrella of that nursery, and it taught us and others what to look for, how to isolate things. It was very structured. It was a plan of like 100,000 square foot. So, we were used to growing out of homes, like buying trap homes and growing and selling the trap home after we were done with it. Again, this was well before things nothing that people do now. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so with that, it's understanding of how to grow in a more structured environment.
Yeah.
And I thought CBD seeds were a wonderful experience. So if you have any CBD seeds that you could propagate, that would be a good opportunity. And stay tuned, that cultivation resource fire, like Precious said, a lot of good gems there. And I'm
Yeah.
sure they have some annotations of references where you could look.
Yeah, absolutely. And our executive director, Tahi, just dropped in the chat the cultivation Q&A video that you can watch on YouTube along with some of our other Q&A sessions. All right, last question here because you guys do have quite a few and we are reaching that mark. But I think this is a worthwhile question. It says, good evening. We are applying for our micro dispensary conversion application and congratulations. Are in need of some assistance preparing our SOPs. Is there any specific format and way you should be written to submit to the CRC? Is there anyone or place that we can go to for assistance?
Great question. First, you could look to see what was currently submitted in your first application. Your conversion documents are more of that blueprint of now you turn on the lights, you open the door. Those are your policies and procedures, which really should be an expansion of what you submitted. I would say talk to your legal counsel. If not, I do know individuals, and I will chat with the CTA because I don't know the rules of making referrals, of individuals who help with that. But again, if you have legal counsel, they would be a good resource to assist you with that, but also too, looking at what's been already submitted on the portal. Most of the things on the portal, um, going through levels 1 through 9, you already have your SOP.
Yeah.
Many of the CTA instructors like myself gave templates of our SOP. So in that, I would take that, I would put your name on it, then modify it to build out your dispensary. But most of the levels that preceded mine have some sort of template format. And I think that was one of the things I really liked about this program because you gave a lot of free resources and templates. So I know that was part of the packaging that we had to turn into. I would go
Yeah.
back and look at the previous levels and some of the documents those instructors have because there should be a template in there for you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And thank you for that. I second that. Definitely go back through the CTA portal. You'll find that every instructor talks about every section of the application, every single section, down to your environmental plan,
Yeah.
down to your workforce development plan, down to your community plan, right? We have an instructor that talks about every single part, down to your LPA agreements, how you structure those and how they should be written, down to even how you write it, 12-point font, Times New Roman, if there's even specifics around there. So definitely go through the CTA. We have those resources, and something that Suzanne said earlier, there's a wealth of resources that you can look at other people's applications to pull insights from and research. I think all those things come together to help. So thank you for that last question. That sort of just brought us back to where we started in terms of how to build your SOPs. Shout out to all you guys for your participation and for hanging out with us this last hour. Suzanne, I thank you so much for your time and coming to bless us as an
Thank
OG
you.
with so many gems. I feel like people have walked away with things that like you're not gonna know unless you were here. Just any last words before we close out for the evening?
I would say stay motivated. You know, like we started this conversation offline that cannabis is what you make it. It is a journey. So prepare for the journey. Be
Yeah.
well hydrated, gain friends, gain resources, and gain knowledge. But I would say gain friends. It's a place of companionship. Cannabis is the great communicator and it brings people together. So there are so many people in this New Jersey cannabis community and expanding community that tap into their resources. And when you see people, introduce yourself, say hi, go to networking events, get out there, get out of your comfort zone, be friendly. Again, everyone is here for something, and if you meet as many people are there for the things that you're there for, you're going to gain a large network of people because that network of people will be your like safe haven. They'll be your resources. I'm very lucky. I always say the class of 2019. New Jersey Cannabis Trade Association has been a great place for me as well. Good people, good companies, meeting people. I always believe don't work in silos. Um, Sometimes when you're a critique of something, I always say, well, join it, maybe be a part of it. How do you change something? So for me, it's being able to be a part of the industry at itself. And because I want this to be something impactful for my kids, I want people to say, like, she really created something great here and left a pathway for people to grow. And everyone who's doing amazing things here. And don't be afraid of the no, because if there's as many no's, there's as many yeses. And the idea that you have is the idea that you have. And sometimes not everyone is going to understand that, and that's okay. But be comfortable in who you are and make sure you show up every day in a positive way.
Well, I know no other words to say to end out our webinar. Thank you again so much, Suzanne, for that, for re-inspiring all of us, including myself. Again, for everyone who joined us, thank you. This will be posted on the portal and on our YouTube. And have a good night. Bye,
All
everyone.
right, see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.